Okay. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Today's Parsha, doing a sermon on Parsha Korach. We'll be focusing on Numbers chapter 17, and the title of today's message is called Chief of Staff. You know, Parsha Korach is named and known for the Korach rebellion and how he and his followers were killed. And there was a second rebellion just after, and God sent out a plague killing 14,700 rebels. God then orders the heads of each tribe to bring their staffs, bearing their names and Aaron's name, to be put on the staff of Levi. And the next morning, Aaron's staff had budded and grown almonds and flowers. And today we'll be looking into the matter of Aaron's staff and what we can learn from this true biblical account in the Torah and apply its lessons to better our own lives and grow in our faith and closeness to our Father in heaven and our Messiah. Numbers 17, beginning in verse 16 in Jewish Bibles and in verse 1 in Christian Bibles. Here's what it says. Adonai said to Moses, "Speak to the people of Israel and take from them the staffs, one for each ancestral tribe, from each leader of a tribe, 12 staffs. Write each man's name on his staff, and write Aaron's name on the staff of Levi. For each tribe's leader is to have one staff. Put them in the tent of meeting in front of the testimony where I meet with you. The staff of the man I'm going to choose will sprout buds. In this way, I will put a stop to the complaints the people of Israel keep making against you." Moses spoke to the people of Israel, and all their leaders gave him their staffs, and one for each leader according to their ancestral tribes, 12 staffs, and Aaron's staff was among their staffs. And Moses put the staffs before Adonai in the tent of the testimony, and the next day Moses went into the tent of the testimony, and there he saw that Aaron's staff for the house of Levi had budded. It had sprouted not only buds, but flowers and ripe almonds as well. Moses brought out all the staffs from before Adonai to all the people of Israel, and they looked, and each man took back his staff. Verse 25 or verse 10. And Adonai said to Moses, "Return Aaron's staff to its place in front of the testimony. It is to be kept there as a sign to the rebels so that they will stop grumbling against me and thus not die." And Moses did this. He did exactly as Adonai had ordered him. Now, after the service last Shabbat, I was wondering what to teach on for this Parsha. And I seem to be hearing number 17 in my mind. The story of how the staff of Aaron miraculously buds somehow was calling me. And I think it was because the time of crisis that we're all in right now. And, a staff is more or less a dead stick. But from that dead stick, that dead walking staff, that rod, God caused it to become alive, to have new life. It's like in the winter, most of the leaves fall off the trees. It's basically, you look outside, there's almost no leaves except for wintry trees. And there's, everything's covered in winter glow and snow and cold. And all you see is these, kind of rickety branches with nothing on them. And then spring comes, and new life emerges, new flowers, new leaves, along with new allergies and pollens. But the point is that new life comes from that which was dead. And I thought about the budding of the flowers and the almonds that are coming off of Aaron's staff, and it was somehow calling to me. I wondered, though, what was so significant about this passage that Adonai had highlighted in my mind? And as I reflected on it this week, I began to see some profound truths in the passage come alive for me. The background of this chapter is that the people of Israel had challenged the authority of Aaron. In Numbers 17, we read of how God quelled the rebellion of Korach and his followers, even after God destroyed the rebels against Moses and Aaron. There were still challenges against their authority. And there were especially challenges to Aaron's position as high priest. And in Numbers 17, God establishes a test. All of the leaders of the 12 tribes were to submit a staff from their leaders. And the name of each leader was to be written on the staff of that tribe, and these were to be placed before the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of the Testimony. The names of each leader were there, and that staff, the staff that would bud would be the one that would indicate the one chosen by God to be high priest. Let's examine some details of this story at this point. Now, the Hebrew word for staff in this passage is matah or mate. And it's no accident that God chose the Hebrew language to communicate his word to mankind. Because what we often find is that God uses these Hebrew words with double or triple meanings to prove a point. And this word matah has several meanings. It can mean staff or branch. It can have a meaning of discipline, as with a staff, or governing, as with a scepter. It can be a walking staff, and it can also represent the support of life. And this word matah is also used in a verse from Ezekiel chapter 4, verse 16. It says in Ezekiel 4:16, "Moreover, he said to me, Son of man, behold, I will break the staff of bread in Jerusalem. They will eat bread by weight and with fearfulness, and they will drink water by measure and in dismay." The word matah, by the way, can also mean tribe. In number 17, we see that 12 staffs are chosen to represent 12 tribes. Something else I found very interesting is that the rod that blossomed alludes to Yeshua, the righteous branch that came back to life and has been given the authority of the ineffable name. Philippians 2 verse 9 says, "God highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name." He is the high priest in the heavenly temple, the high priest in the order of Melchizedek, seated at the right hand of God. Adonai commanded Moses to keep Aaron's staff before the ark to be kept as a sign for future generations. And the writer of the book of Hebrews points out that Moses kept 3 things inside the ark. Hebrews 9 verse 4 confirms that a golden jar holding the manna, and Aaron's rod which budded, and the tablets of the covenant. Each item alludes to one of 3 offices of Messiah: prophet, priest, and king. In his first appearance, Yeshua came primarily in the role of a prophet. After his resurrection and ascension, he entered his role as our eternal high priest. But when he returns, he will reign as king of all. You see, the manna here, it symbolizes his role as a prophet, as it says, "He fed you manna, that he might make you understand that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by everything that proceeds from the mouth of Adonai," Deuteronomy 8:3. And then Yeshua said in John 6, verse 41, "I am the bread that came down out of heaven." Now, Aaron's staff that budded symbolizes his resurrection and priestly ministry, seated at the right hand of the Father. The tablets of the covenant symbolize his role as king and lawgiver, his authority. And in the Messianic era, all nations will be subject to King Messiah, and the Torah will go forth from Zion. And also of interest is that Aaron's staff was kept in the Ark of the Testimony of God's choice of the house of Aaron. According to Jewish legend, though, I'll read from Midrash, it says, "The same staff was held in the hand of every king until the temple was destroyed, and then it was hidden away. And that same staff also is destined to be held in the hand of King Messiah." The Midrash assures us that when Messiah comes, Aaron's staff will be placed into his hand. And as a proof text, it cites a verse from Psalm 110, the psalm most quoted by the apostles as they taught about Yeshua. And in Numbers Rabbah, the Midrash, it says, the same staff is also destined to be held in the hand of King Messiah. May he come speedily in our days. As it says in Psalm 110, verse 2, the Lord will stretch forth your strong scepter from Zion, saying, rule in the midst of your enemies. As we have seen, the Hebrew word matah is the same word used for tribe and staff. The staff of Aaron in this story has two very distinct qualities. One, it is alive, and two, it is fruitful. Pay attention. About that it is alive. We read in this account that the staff represent the tribe of Levi that buds. I once wondered why God chose the tribe of Levi to provide spiritual leadership for the nation of Israel, and I myself am a Levite. But why? Why Levi? In the beginning of the Torah in Bereshit, the book of Genesis, we see Levi was one of Jacob's worst sons. Consider Jacob's last words to Levi. In Genesis 49, verses 5 to 7, when Jacob is blessing his sons on his deathbed, he's blind, he's old, and before he dies, he wants to bless all the sons. And when it comes to Simon and Levi, he says this: Simon and Levi are brothers. Instruments of violence are their knives. In their secret council may my soul not enter. In their contingent may my honor never be united. For in their anger they slew men, and in their self-will they maimed oxen. Cursed be the anger, cursed be their anger, for it was strong, and their rage, for it was cruel. I will disperse them in Jacob. I will scatter them in Israel. Now, from reading this passage, it seems that Levi would be somewhere toward the bottom of the list to be chosen to lead spiritual life in Israel. This, however, was not the case. So why Levi? Why not Judah or one of the other tribes? And one answer is that Levi was redeemed from its checkered past when they stood with Moses on God's side after the incident of the golden calf. And Moses says, all of you who are on the side of God, come to me. And all the tribe of Levi went to his side. But I believe the answer to this question is much deeper than that. I believe the answer is in the meaning of the name of Levi. The name Levi means joined or attached. And I believe this meaning is significant because in the Tanakh, names have great meaning, like Isaac means laughter. And I believe that God, in choosing Levi, is saying that he is seeking a people who would be attached or joined to him. What did the 12 staffs have in common before they were brought before the testimony? They were all dead pieces of wood that had been broken off from their life source. In this story, we see that the staff of Aaron blooms, it buds, it grows. If a normal staff cannot bloom because it has been severed from its life source, then the staff of Aaron blooms because it is attached to a life source, God himself. And I believe God chose the tribe of Levi to be a spiritual leader of Israel to show that such a position is not based upon personal ability or merit or position, but rather on one's attachment to him. In this understanding of Torah that opens our eyes to see how and why we as Yeshua believers are all priests with Messiah as our high priest. You see 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. We are all high priests, a holy nation chosen by God. And if we have life at all in our lives, it's only because we are attached to God. We are joined to Messiah. In John chapter 15, verses 5 through 8, Yeshua speaks about branches. He says, I am the vine and you are the branches. The one who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit. and apart from me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and is dried up. Such branches are picked up and thrown into the fire and burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it shall be done for you. In this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. God does not intend for his children to be dead branches, but alive branches. When people saw Aaron's branch, they took notice of it because it was different than the other staffs everyone else carried. They weren't just dead sticks. Where those staffs were dead and barren, Aaron's staff was full of life. Just as the staff of resurrected with life confirmed Aaron's position over the other tribal leaders, so the resurrection of Messiah Yeshua confirms him as the true Messiah over and above any of these leaders of false religions in the world. And what of individual believers who have fallen away? And we know there are many. I'm sure every one of us knows them. Some of them, at least one person. And they have allowed themselves to be broken away from the life source so that they have the appearance of every other dead stick in the world. We must ask ourselves, when people see us, what do they see? Do we look like the other dead sticks in the world, or do we show the life of Messiah? A little itchy here. Secondly, we mentioned earlier before that the staff had two qualities. It was alive and it was fruitful. Let's deal with the fruitful part. The great thing about this Aaron's staff is that it's not just alive, but it is fruitful. It is almonds and flowers growing upon it. And thinking about this made me think about our own spiritual lives. When I consider our position as believers, as followers of Messiah, God certainly desires that we would bear fruit, not stagnate or fall away or wither. God does not desire that we as believers would just keep the life of God to ourselves, but that we would be able to share his presence with other people. What is the fruit of the believer's life? Well, Paul wrote in Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23, the CJB translation says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, humility, self-control, and nothing in the Torah stands against such things." Have you ever seen ripe apples on a neighbor's tree that you wanted to just grab one? May the spiritual fruit in our own lives be so tantalizing to those in the world that they would want to have some of it. May the peace and love in our lives be so real that others would desire to partake of that fruit. You know, as I was preparing this message, I reflected on the different purposes that staffs had in the time of Aaron. First of all, it was about identity. In Numbers 17, we see that Aaron's staff was a source of identity for him. It was certainly the most famous staff mentioned in the Bible. It was the staff of Aaron that was cast down before Pharaoh and transformed into a serpent. It was the raised staff of Aaron at the waters of the Nile where they were turned to blood. And in Numbers 17, we see that a budding staff would confirm his position as the spiritual leader of Israel. When Aaron walked about the camp in Israel, he carried with him a life showing that God was with him. In this way, Aaron was not only the high priest, but he could have been seen as Moses' chief of staff. But as I reflected on this staff, I felt challenged. We as believers need to show that God is with us, not just say, "I'm a believer." I think that was the song in the 60s or 70s, "I'm a believer." Are we? I feel challenged. This isn't something just for temple priests or modern day clergy, but something for all believers. We need to show that God is with us. Those of you who have secular jobs come into contact with lost people every day. In what ways do you represent God to the people you work with, to the people you see on the street, your neighbors, your friends? Do they sense a real spiritual authority governing your life? Or are you the I do whatever I want kind of believer? Do you want to hear good and faithful servant from the Messiah on that last great day? Or do you want to hear from the Messiah, as he said in the good news, go away from me, I never knew you. What many people in the world are seeking is genuine spiritual authority. Consider Matthew chapter 7, verses 28 and 29. It says, now when Yeshua had finished these words, the crowds were astounded at his teaching. For he was teaching them as one having real authority and not as their Torah scholars. We as believers are called to be lights of life to a lost and dying world. God would desire that we carry that example of life and miracle and hope and faith as confidently as Aaron carried his staff. Secondly, security. It seemed that staffs during the time of Aaron were often used as weapons or to stave off wild animals. It was likely that a staff that like that of Moses, drove off the shepherds that challenged the daughters of Yitro in Exodus chapter 2. Maybe Moses used his staff to, fight them off. When people looked upon the staff of Aaron, perhaps they were reminded in how they trusted in their own staffs for security. But they saw something different in Aaron's staff, different from their own. His staff was alive with the presence of God. It was undeniable. Aaron carrying the living staff reminded the people of Israel that they were to put their trust in a living God and not in dead wood or metal idols. God repeatedly reminded the people of Israel that their military successes were not due to their own powers, but in his power, a power he often displayed through Moses and through Aaron. King David, in writing Tehillim 23, the 23rd Psalm, he found comfort in the strength of God symbolized by a staff. In Psalm 23, verse 4, King David wrote, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. They comfort me. And we're going to get into what exactly he was talking about. What is God's rod and staff that comforted David? Did God send down a staff from heaven like the one Aaron or Moses had for David to walk around on? Is that what he's talking about here? These days, many people look to different things for their security. They look to the things of this world. They look to the dead stick instead of the living branch. What do we put our own security in times of difficulty? Is it in the dead wood of this world or in a living God? Lastly, there is the support factor. As Aaron was getting along in years, I imagine he leaned on his staff for support, right? If support, getting older, was kind of like a crutch. You didn't see any canes mentioned in the Bible. Crutch is perhaps a staff to lean upon to help you. And as mentioned before, one of the places we see staff or matah mentioned is Ezekiel 4:16, said a man, behold, I will break the staff of bread in Jerusalem. Staffs indeed seem to hold great significance for the Hebrews of old, the ancient Hebrews. Staffs indeed seem to be used figuratively to speak of the support of life, a support system. And as I reflected on the staff being something that one leans on to support of life, I have to ask, what is it that we often lean on? Do we lean on that which is living or that which is dead? Do I lean on my job or my bank account, my house, my apartment, the things of this world? You know, Paul faced many difficult circumstances in his life, situations that would have shattered him if he had relied on his own abilities or his own strength. We see in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 through 10, of a time in his life when he had to especially lean on the presence of God. It says, therefore, to keep me from becoming overly proud, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from the adversary to pound away at me, so that I wouldn't grow conceited. 3 times I begged the Lord to take this thing away from me, but he told me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is brought to perfection in weakness. Therefore, I am very happy to boast about my weakness in order that the Messiah's power will rest upon me. Yes, I am well pleased with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and difficulties endured on behalf of the Messiah. For it is when I am weak that I am strong. Paul, in one of his most difficult hours, leaned upon the living vine, Yeshua the Messiah. What is it that we lean on in the most difficult circumstances? The world, our own resources? All of that is only dead sticks compared to God. A dead stick will break under certain pressure, but a living vine will support us no matter what. What is it we carry in the world we live in? Is it barren and ordinary, much like the staffs of other people? Or is it living and fruitful? Do people see that you carry that which is living or that which is dead? Does your life bear fruit that others would want to partake of it? Those are some nice apples on your tree. Can I have one? Yeshua said, a tree is known by its fruit. What fruit is on your tree? What do you look for in your own security? What do you look for your support? Today you may feel like a dead stick, and I want to tell you that there is hope for you. I want to tell you that the Spirit of God is in you and can transform you to become all that He has intended you to be. I believe that God is interceding for you right now. I felt it all this week. I feel it today. I feel it right now. I felt it last night. God is interceding for you right now. You only need to respond to what He is leading you to do now. You have been given a budded staff to lean upon, a staff of power, a staff of blessing, a staff of authority over evil. That staff is Yeshua. The rod and staff that comforted King David in Psalm 23 is Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach. Yeshua is the staff, and the almonds are the Ruach, the Holy Spirit, the evidence of the power and spirit of the living God. Genesis 49 verse 10 states that the scepter will not pass from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. And Revelation 19 verse 15 says, he will rule them with a staff of iron. God has given you the Matah Chesed, the staff of loving kindness, to be a staff for others to lean on. I'm going to betray my age here a bit, but there was a famous song in the early 70s called Lean On Me by Bill Withers. And by the way, he just passed away this April 2020. Don't know if it was COVID or what it was, but he passed away, Bill Withers. He had a couple of big hits in the early 70s. One of them was Lean On Me. And some of the lyrics, I'm not going to sing it for you, but I want to read some of the lyrics of that song for you. I want you to try to remember them if you've never heard it before. And if you've never heard it before, or if you'd like to hear it again after the messages today, after the service today, go find it on YouTube and play it. Lean On Me by Bill Withers. It says, sometimes in our lives, we all have pain. We all have sorrow. But if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. You just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on. If there's a load you have to bear that you can't carry, I'm right up the road. I'll share your load. And the song reminded me so much of leaning on a staff, leaning on God, leaning on the Messiah, leaning on Yeshua. Yeshua says in Matthew 11:28-30, he says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." See, when you help other people, when you are the shoulder for them to cry on, or the gentle ear to listen to their problems, it is then that Messiah's light shines through you. It is then when you become most like him, when you rely on the true staff, the true rod, that which you can always lean on. And it is then when you become the friend and the faith builder, the helper and the healer, the shoulder and the shepherd. God has given you the staff of Messiah. Mata Mashiach. And he has made you chief of staff of your life. You know, I'm sure we've all heard the phrase, it's all about Yeshua, or in the church, it's all about Jesus. It's supposed to just sum up everything about the faith. I don't know about that. I'll tell you why. That's our human perception of Scripture, of the Bible, of the Messiah. But it's not his perception. You see, for God, it's all about you. In his famed Sermon on the Mount, Yeshua says to us, "Now you are the light of the world." He's the light of the world. Later he says, "Now you are the light of the world." He's passing it on to us. Just like Moses put his hands upon Joshua and transferred some of his glory that God had given him onto Joshua for his future leadings before Moses went up on the mountain to go and sleep with his fathers, to pass on. When I think about you are the light of the world, it's like he is saying today, I've given you the staff. What are you going to do with it? When Moses was on the mountain with God in Exodus chapter 5, and those of you that are listening to this message and going like, well, I don't actually have a staff, or I don't feel that, or I'm not sure about that, I'm not called to do that. You believe in Messiah, you've already been called. Answer your phone. Moses was on the mountain with God in Exodus 5. God gave him a mission to go to Pharaoh and tell him, let my people go. Moses starting to come up with all kinds of excuses. And then he says to God, but look, they will not believe me or listen to my voice. They will say, Adonai has not appeared to you. And so God said to him, what is that in your hand? And Moses answered, a staff. What's that in your hand? And when Moses was with all the Hebrews and the mixed multitude at the edge of the Red Sea, just after they left on their journey away from bondage, Pharaoh and his whole army closing in to slaughter them, Moses calls upon God to save them and fight for them. But God answers Moses saying, why are you crying to me? Lift your staff and part the sea. I've already given you the power, it's like God is saying. Then lift your staff. Part the sea. You've got the power. You've got the staff. That's what he has done with you. And that is what God is saying to you right now. I have given you the staff of Messiah, the staff of light and loving kindness. Lift your staff and part that sea in your life. and use it to part the seas in the lives of others. I'm going to close this way. Lift your staff and say to the lost. Lift your Messiah and say to the lost. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. You got to say to them, my staff is from God. His name is Yeshua, and you can lean on him anytime. He will give you rest and hope and love, and he calls you his friend. So remember, God has made you the chief of staff of your life. Use what he has given you to help yourselves and help others. Lean on him anytime. Shabbat shalom. God bless you all.